begin.
Welcome to Conversations with Melissa. I'm Melissa. This is part of RenaFi's Experts and Influencers series. RenaFi provides practical research-based advice, courses, and peer support with focuses on the underlying drivers of our ADHD behavior. Through courses like budgeting for the ADHD, home organizing for the ADHD lifestyle, and of course, our ADHD book club, to name just a few, we provide a holistic program that serves to help you thrive with ADHD, not in spite of it. We invite you to follow our YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the chat in just a moment. And we have got a little project that's near and dear to our hearts called ADHD Voices Project. You can call and leave an anonymous message or text your story. We're not collecting your contacts. The phone number for that to share your ADHD story, how it is for you, is 925-289-9033. And I will put all of those things in the chat right now. So here we go with that. And then, so how I met Linda. Linda brought herself to our attention. I think we had, we were doing a evening with Sari Solden, and you reached out to us, and the timing became right very recently. And you've got your book, around nonverbal learning disability. We're also on a committee around the ADHD 2024 conference, and so we've gotten together to talk about those things too. What I will say is, it felt like something about Linda just clicks. I just feel like I know her. There's a connection. It's more beyond the surface of New Jersey-ness connection.
Yes.
There's a warmth, a self-advocacy, a sense of humor.
Yes.
Yeah.
So glad that we met.
Indeed.
And you mentioned Sari Solden. I actually dedicated the book to her. I don't know if you know that.
I might have, but it's new to me now.
I dedicated it to her because I met her at the first ADHD conference like 25 years ago. And she was just so inspiring, and like she was a mentor to me. So I just wanted to mention her because she was a groundbreaker for women with ADHD. So great for Sari. Sari Solden.
Indeed. Well, you have a lot of education, and I very recently in conversation, you had mentioned you've been a CHAD group coordinator for a dozen years. So you're very involved in the ADHD universe.
Yes.
We came to learn about this other element, this other thing that has some commonalities with the ADHD, the nonverbal learning disability. Can you, is that right?
Yeah, nonverbal learning disorder. I also have nonverbal learning disorder, which took me many years to find out that I had it, and I didn't know what was wrong. So not much is known about it still, but we are getting more research and more information. So we know that almost 3 million people have NVLD, and about half of them are misdiagnosed or undiagnosed, and most of them are misdiagnosed with ADHD. So if people are listening tonight, if you're feeling like there's something off, that, I've been diagnosed with ADHD, but something just isn't fitting here. This might be what the missing piece to the puzzle. So that's, and often ADHD, medication. I take medication for ADHD. But if you're misdiagnosed with ADHD and you have NVLD, you're on medication that's not helping you. And that's another important reason to know the difference. So NVLD, nonverbal learning disorder, is a very confusing name because the first thing when I tell people about it, They say to me, well, you speak, and I'm like, yeah, we do speak. Uh, but it's a very misleading term. And there's a lot of overlapping symptoms with ADHD and autism level 1. And that's why not many people know about it, because there's like a default diagnosis, because it's not in the DSM, which is everybody, if you don't know, that's the Bible of psychological disorders. I hate to say disorders,
I know they know their nomenclature to get fancy. They could use some.
Yeah,
They
because
could use some new
everybody
names.
thinks and learns and does things differently. So I don't know why a negativity has to be attached to it, because we are neurodiverse.
We are neurodiverse. Well, I really like where your angle that you're coming from, right? We got our ADHD diagnosis. I got mine as an adult, and I lump all sorts of things underneath it. And as I learn about other things, maybe I've put things under the ADHD category that don't belong there. Maybe there's like auditory processing I should learn about.
Right.
So this is about this nonverbal type of learning. And I imagine there's some parents in the room who are thinking, is this around my child? But there's a lot of other people in the room as adults going, is this something I want to learn about? Does it fit?
It's really important information. I wanted to thank you for sharing the platform, because it's just going to help so many people. They don't know what they don't know. And so, so you wanted me to get into, what did you ask me in the beginning? What is NVLD?
Yeah, what is, let's get a handle about what is that? What is that?
Okay, NVLD means that there's 5 components to it, but I'm just going to give you in a nutshell. You're not getting nonverbal communication, and depending on the research, it varies. Anywhere from like 65% to 93% is nonverbal communication, meaning like facial expressions, gestures, tone of voice, any kind of body language. So if you're not getting that, and that's the majority, let's go with the 93%, it's very hard to function like you're getting 7%. You're only getting the words that people are speaking. That's it. And the majority is 93%. So all that changes the meaning of the words completely. So people with NVLD can be very literal. So could you imagine how difficult that is in all aspects of life? And with ADHD, that's not the case. With ADHD, there's people that are gifted socially. They may struggle with, we're calling this social skills, right, for now, under that umbrella. But if they're struggling with it, it's typically because they're not focused and they're not observing. Like, we learn social skills, social communication when we're younger by role modeling. Like, nobody teaches us, we learn 1 + 1 = 2, but we don't learn nonverbal communication. We don't learn social skills. I mean, your parents might say, take your hat off at the dinner table, take your hands, but we're supposed to observe it, mostly the nonverbal. And so that's where it would come into play with ADHD, but it wouldn't be caused by the root of NVLD is that body language, that 93%, which the cause of that, like what's the root cause of that is, changes different areas in the brain. And so it's primarily a visual spatial processing disorder, because when you're talking to somebody and you have to visually process facial expressions. Now, tone of voice is about 38% out of the 93. But it's a visual spatial processing deficit, which shows up in social communication, because that part of that is visual. In math, a lot of difficulties with math. I still to this day struggle with math, which is dyscalculia, executive functioning, which a lot of people are probably very well versed in that, because that's the buzzword, right? Executive functioning, and motor skills. Things like riding a bike, skipping, jumping, throwing a ball, say not good in sports, bumping into things, tripping, falling, tying your shoes. And there is a continuum, there is a spectrum So you could be mild, moderate, or severe. Like I have people that I work with, they can't do buttons or zippers. Like they typically wear sweatpants.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
I had worked at a place here in Los Angeles that does rehabilitation for visually impaired, fully blind, total and partially sighted. And I remember I had seen a movie and we were having lunch. So some of my coworkers, completely blind. And I
Mhm.
said something about, oh, the actress was just, she conveyed so much, no dialogue, the emotions changed on her face. And then what got said back to me was like, oh, all of that would have been not accessible to them as blind people who don't see
As blind
people's
people, right?
facial expressions.
Right.
So, you know, they rely on asking out loud, hearing intonation in voice. And if that kind of communication that you're talking about, this
Mhm.
nonverbal, I mean,
Right.
sometimes people make sounds that are not words, but they convey something like,
Right.
right? But
Right.
there's a lot that happens that's relies on that we are looking, that we notice it, that we have some sort of context to put it in and decide, oh,
Right.
that means I'm going to do this, right? Something like
Right.
that. Mm-hmm.
So we base our decisions on how we communicate with other people. And if we're not getting it and misunderstanding it, there's a lot of ramifications on the job, in personal relationships, friendships, and deeper relationships like love relationships, with spouses and partners. But I want to go back. I
Yes,
wrote
let's
something
go back.
down
Mm-hmm.
because this is a good technique. We are ADHD, we're trying to stay on topic here. So when you said about the experience you had with blind people, there were two things that hit me, and I wrote them down and I'm just going to throw this out there. This is a strategy with poor active working memory, which is executive functioning, keeping all these things in your head and talking to somebody and being able to remember what they said while you're able to think about how to respond. You got to manipulate all this in your brain at one time. It's like going to a buffet and you fill up the plate and like if you do, everybody, like some people really like to pile it up, right? Oh, it's free, and it falls off, and that's kind of what happens. So the technique is, it's called a parking lot. So sometimes I have a picture of a car. I don't have one here, like with my clients, or if I'm working with kids on executive functioning, I'll have like a sports car. And then I'll say, when you think of something that you want to say, but you still have to listen to somebody, and then when it's your turn to speak and you forget, have you had that? Where you forget and you're like, oh, I need to respond to that. And you don't even remember what the point was to show them that you were listening.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wrote it down. So there were two parts, what you said about that. And one was, when somebody's blind, they get understanding and compassion and leeway because it's, for lack of a better, no pun intended, it's visible to other people.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
They
And there's
know.
complaints from people who, I had a friend who was partially sighted. She could recognize light and shadow. And so in conversation, she's looking at your face. Can she see your lips? No. And that
Right.
would happen to her is people would say, you don't look blind. Like, therefore,
Right.
I'm not going to accommodate you. I don't know what that means. But what you're
Right.
saying
Or
is, if
people in
people,
handicap spots. Yeah.
people can't recognize this
Right.
this
So it's
challenge.
invisible, and they, but they get the understanding. So, if you're in a wheelchair, somebody's going to open the door for you, or somebody's going to bring you something. But with NVLD, you don't get that compassion or leeway at all. And so, because with NVLD, you are so well spoken, you have a high verbal intelligence, and we can get into that later. But you're so well spoken that people assume that you are equally in all other areas equal. So it can go both two ways. They can think, so you're very well spoken, you have high verbal intelligence. So if you're not getting something, and they're like, well, that person's lazy or rude or self-centered, because they think, and these are things you really struggle with, or they might think you're not as intelligent as you really are. If if you're not understanding what they're saying. But I point out, people with NVLD have average to above average intelligence.
Mm.
So when you said that about the blind, it reminded me of the compassion and understanding that you don't get.
Mm-hmm.
And also in my book, I used that example. I don't know if you saw that, where I said, if you were blind and you had to memorize where everything is in a room, where you had a stick, you would know where everything was and you would be able to manage. Right? You've worked with people like that they could get around their house. Some of them could,
Yes.
some of them
Yes.
cook, some of them, right. And there are other areas where heightened. But if you, now let's say you move all the furniture around for somebody who's blind. What are they going to do? How are they going to cope? They're going to try to find their way around. They're going to bump into stuff. But the person that changed the environment, they're going to have to interact with them. Do you know how they would do that? I mean,
I imagine first you need to say it out loud. Hey, I rearranged the room.
Right.
You might need to use your white cane to find where things are in the room.
Right. Or, you know what, the microwave, that chair is now over here. Let's go over there, touch that chair. And it's right next to the TV.
Mm-hmm.
Where before that chair was on the other side of the TV. So, you would walk them through it. So that's the example I use. So people with NVLD, when they don't understand what's going on, they ask a million bazillion questions. So many questions. Just like somebody was blind. Well, where did you put this? I went over there. Oh, I bumped into that. They're going to ask you, where's this? Where's that? Where's this? Why did you put that there? Why did you move that? They may get mad at you, right? So people with NVLD, one of the telltale signs is they ask so many questions that others get really annoyed with them. And it's kind of embarrassing because you don't want to be that way. And it makes you look less intelligent than you really are. Now, me, at my age, I'm a professional, so it's a different experience for me than with other people because I'm a professional and I live with it. And so I have a lot of coping strategies, but I'm still struggling it today. And I'll give you an example. But people, don't like generally to be badgered, and it can feel like these arrows and bullets are coming at you one at a time. Boom, why'd you do this? And you just keep going and going and going. And the other person can get worn down and exhausted. And the thing is you have to ask a lot of questions and people want you to listen. But if you're not understanding as you're going along in the conversation, you have to stop. So a good strategy is to say, hey, I am going to have, you may think I'm interrupting you, but I'm not interrupting you. I need to stop and ask a question so that I can understand what you're saying, so that the new information, I can apply it to the new information.
This kind of sounds a little to me. I'm a fan of that air disasters. And sometimes you'll hear, they'll be playing a disaster where the air traffic control person thinks they're communicating clearly and the pilot, right. And no matter what they keep saying to each other, there's clearly a disconnect. You realize we need to go back all the way and start this conversation anew, because either there's a problem on one end or the other. So let's start anew,
right,
and get some clarity. We had a couple of questions. I'm gonna roll through where we can. One was around the DSM, which we mentioned early on. That's the way people who diagnose things. That's the you use the word Bible, but that's the resource. Any progress?
The diagnostic statistical manual, right?
Right. Any movement on that? Any movement on getting this in there?
Yes, I was just at the NVLD Project's annual fundraiser in October, and I was there. I was really honored to be their keynote speaker, and all the researchers were there. Most of them, I guess I can't say all of them, but from Columbia University, the NVLD Project funds research through Columbia to do this research. And so we got an update, and it has been submitted to the DSM committee. It is under a new name, and I'm really not happy about it, developmental visual spatial processing disorder, because look, NVLD sounds like we don't speak. Now it sounds like we can't see. Okay.
Well, I
But
mean,
there's a
even
reason
the
for that.
ADHD diagnosis is not, it says
Oh,
it's
I
about
know.
attention, but that name seems not to be good either.
And
So,
that's not right either, right? Because we
yeah,
have a
yeah,
surplus of attention.
yeah.
Right. So, but there is a reason for this. And I've talked about it extensively with one of the researchers. And she did pass my feedback on to the committee because there is no one on the committee that's a professional that has NVLD. So, so they're doing this because they have to differentiate this from autism and ADHD because there's so much overlap. None of autism, people that are autistic have very strong visual spatial skills, very strong. But the overlap is the social area. Mm-hmm. People with NVLD want to be social. People with, now it's autism level one, formerly Asperger's. They, some of them really do want to be social because, nobody fits. When you've met one person with NVLD or autism, that's saying you've met just one person. Some of them are very happy to be alone and are content that way. Well, NVLD people are not. They want to, to have relationships. And so I'm giving a little bit of the back reason why they changed the name. People with NVLD and ADHD have, their affect, their facial expressions, their tone of voice. People with autism level one, formerly Asperger's, they're very flat. They usually typically just are kind of monotone, and that's not to say that there's anything wrong. I hate to say that there's something wrong because all of our brains are wired differently. We all think, learn, and do things differently, but neurotypical people are the ones that are the majority, right? They think in the same way. We're kind of like the minority. Right. So, I want to clarify that. I don't want to come across as, because I don't necessarily believe in that, because they made a lot of contributions to society.
Absolutely. We have the planet together. We want to share it. We just would like to carve out a little room and understanding for ourselves.
So why does there have to be that there's something wrong with someone when it really is judgment?
Yeah.
And the majority in my mind always rules, right? We always do things this way. We communicate this way. This is the way it's done but if we were in the majority, this is just my crazy thinking. The neurotypicals, they'd have some kind of disorder because we would be in the majority with the creativity. And so I really think that it's kind of, everybody needs to be accepted, but going back, the developmental visual spatial processing disorder, because these things are so similar, they're using that name because it will not get accepted unless it is clearly defined of why it's different because of the overlap. And the core deficit of NVLD, it's from the brain. It's the connection from the right to left hemisphere. And now we have and from the cerebellum. Because that's where we get our motor and our balance and things like that. I think it's also emotions. But that's the core. And so that's what it is. And it has to be defined that way. There's very little in the new definition, anything about communication, which is very disappointing because, and I did have asked for that to be shared with the committee because now you're going to go to a professional to get help. And they're going to just look at it like it's this visual thing, unless they have a lot of training. I don't know, how that's going to work with helping people. But the big step is it's going to get in there. Mm-hmm. So it will get in there soon. They asked for some more research.
Well, that's very exciting to have it go from.
Even the researchers agreed with them. They said, yes, you know what? We do need to do this and that. And so they're compiling that now. So, everything takes a long time. But one of the holdups was that, there's people all over the world and every country disagreeing. Some don't think NVLD is a diagnosis. And all these professionals have been fighting. You can learn more about this in Jessica Breitman's book. If you go online on she's a researcher, but she's got a book that, it's not all research and she has real life examples. But because it's considered a research book, it's really expensive. You can rent it for so many days, like electronically. I think it's like $80 or something. But the researchers have now come to agree. They've done a lot of arguing. And because you can have NVLD and be autistic at the same time. And so they're getting more research, but now they're agreeing that this is a different disorder and it is going to get in there. And that means people are going to get treatment that's paid for. And that means that there's going to have to be a lot more research. Training. Professionals are going to need to be trained like therapists. We can talk about that, how that can do more damage than good. That happened to me. And the interventions, there are no interventions for NVLD. So I'm kind of answering this because I'm sure people want to know this, with that you can use the interventions that, for autism and ADHD because there's a lot of overlap. So of course those interventions are going to help, but there's no intervention for NVLD. So these teachers, when these kids are pummeling them with questions, they think that they're like being argumentative, oppositional defiant, but you got to remember words are like glasses, So there's going to be a lot of learning to do once it gets in, but there will be coverage. So that's the update.
Right. What I hear in what you're saying is progress is being made, acknowledgement is happening, people are studying it. It co-occurs with ADHD, other things that are brain and
mainly executive functioning.
Okay.
Executive functioning.
I put in the chat the book that you mentioned, a link to it from, and now I have a couple of other questions over here. One's a shorty, one's a long. So this one's short, which is, do NVLDers, is it commonly misdiagnosed as bipolar 2? Is that
You know what? I think that's an excellent question. Thanks for asking that question, or we wouldn't be talking about this. Yes, I believe so, but there's no research on it. I can give you anecdotal information. I have seen people diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, bipolar, then they're on meth. There's nothing to help that because there's such an emotional impact. That you're not understanding people. You may overreact and have a little meltdown. That could look like an autistic thing, right? Yes, I do believe so. And DBT is a form of therapy. And I do use DBT, but I'm not a therapist in that sense. But anybody can buy the DBT book. It's all skills-based. And I use that book because that book, when therapists have tried to use it and have diagnosed for borderline personality disorder, it could be a misdiagnosis, but if they know the person does have NVLD and they're aware of it, you can give them, if this person has been misdiagnosed, I recommend you take my book in. There's a screening that you can take in, and psychiatrists are using it, and therapists and guidance counselors, and you can give them the information because a lot of people don't even think it exists and they won't diagnose it. But I don't want to go too off track. So you can give them that and there's a whole section on therapy in the book. But if you feel that this is a misdiagnosis, you need to educate other people, professionals. And if they're not open to you, then go find another one. I went through a slew of them.
Yes, but, this go fish.
The DBT book.
You're in. I want to pause you for just a second because you said a couple of really important things. I know this is very, very compact amount of information for people to take in. This thing, right? I put the link to Linda's book. Linda's book has got lists. What does this look like in adults? What does it look like in your child? And you can bring these scales and symptoms and these pieces from the book that you filled out yourself to your appointment with your MD, your prescriber, your therapist, you're at one level and you need to get escalated to somebody else. The teacher. So you can bring these with you. Her book is chock full of the kind of resources that if you need help with, for example, finding a diagnosis, getting a diagnosis. So one of the things you just said is you go to an expert, an MD, and they don't see what you think you're seeing, that you don't feel heard. Yeah, we can go back to another, we can go to another provider, we can take ourselves someplace else. This is around self-advocacy. It helps to interview the doctor ahead of time, right? Do you have experience diagnosing this? How many people have you treated with
Right.
this?
That's in
Even
there
if they're
too, right?
an ADHD person, or you're going for that, finding out how well versed they are in it. There's some people who just use that DSM, and it says if you don't show those traits, ADHD traits in childhood, like that's part of their criteria. So we want people who have more familiarity. It's
Right.
having
You
5
have to shop
patients
around.
versus 500 patients. That is a person who knows the
Yeah.
better.
All those questions are in the book. You have to be consumer. And this actually happened to me. I'm trying to keep track here. You're seeing my ADHD coming out, but I'm keeping a handle on it. I'm harnessing it.
All right.
All of those things are in the book. You're a consumer, and you do not want to find yourself in the position of educating someone who knows nothing about NVLD. It is not your job to waste your time and money to educate someone. It is worth it. They don't have to know about NVLD, but if they are open and they want to read the book and they are willing to learn, that person can help you. But you have to find somebody that's willing to do that. And really be wary of when you look on Psychology Today and you're looking for somebody to help you, they have, do you ever go on there and they say they list all these things that they help with? ADHD, every disorder they help with. Well, some people, like realistically, many don't even know about ADHD, NVLD, or they don't believe in it. They just add that little NVLD on there. So don't think because it's on there that they know. Because what is that statistic with ADHD? Now, how many people did you have to go to get that diagnosis? Isn't there a statistic how many people you go through?
I'm not familiar with it. But I hear
there is
I hear
one.
what
Like
you're
you could
saying,
go through
right?
15
Sometimes
people,
we have to knock on a few doors before we find
yes.
A clinician that not only do we feel safe relating to, but and feel heard, but that is meeting us. They're meeting our
Right.
needs, right? This
Right.
isn't just this. In some ways, we need to screen them. I had interviewed a British fellow who's had this book called Sit Still Timmy, and he was talking in his book. He goes into detail about the mental health providers and not feeling heard, and him thinking, well, maybe I just need to stay with this person because I don't know anything. He hadn't really done therapy before. So he had great insights as a person who was new to that arena about, wait a second, I don't feel safe saying everything that I want help with here. So this isn't the right person for me. So I hear you saying that. I put a little blurb in about dialectical behavioral therapy that's from the Cleveland Clinic, just to explain what it is. We have a question. I think we should take breath because we're going kind of fast.
Okay, I want to explain though that that has to be broken down. It is effective for NVLD, but it must be broken down and tailored to the NVLD, or it's not going to work. Because if you have poor executive functioning or other issues, so I break it down. I don't do therapy, but it's a skills based. I just want people to know that.
Okay, thank you. There are 2 questions over here and 2 questions over there. So I don't want to.
Okay.
I want to do a couple of things. One's in the chat, which is,
okay,
maybe I missed something, but if there are no interventions other than the dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, what can one do to help with social lubrication, right? With, I'm going to say, reading the room or other social skills. What can you do?
Right.
We don't have a lot of choices.
Well, you can for that. You can do social skills, social emotional learning. I do that with people like kids, school age kids, because they have social skills groups. They can help. Again, is the person running the group aware of NVLD? What I would recommend is there's 2 different kinds of social skills deficits. There's acquisition deficits and there's performance deficits. So if you put I assume this is for a child in a group, and they don't, especially with NVLD, if the group has to go over the skills before you can practice them. And sometimes with NVLD, that, that can be a little overwhelming. So you have to, again, educate, and you may need more individual coaching. So like I could work with one student and just go over the acquisition things, right? And, it's just standard stuff. How do you show somebody you're listening? You're looking them in the eye, you're nodding your head. How are you going to know what to say back to them? If you don't understand, what do you say back to them? So there's a little bit of difference, but it can help. But with NVLD people, a lot of times if kids go to the group and there's ADHD kids in there, they go home and complain because, Mom, all they did was, this kid sit down, do this, redirect, or they might have some kind of incentive thing where, okay, like behavior mod, you get a token, but they're not learning, they're not getting anything out of it. And if there's kids that are autistic in that group and, they're not really getting what they need. But sometimes it is good to be, and there's pros and cons to be in a group where there's good role modeling as well. Mm-hmm. So you have to shop around, and you have to find somebody that you feel that can help you. And so sometimes kids might need one-on-one to learn some of these things, and then they're a little bit more prepared when they go in a group. So if they go over a skill anyway, then they're already had a foundation. Does that make sense?
It does. That really, right.
And
It sounds also like there could be some coaching or mentoring kinds of things in the social emotional learning where you practice it, you rehearse it, you try it out.
Right. And with NVLD, it's a lot of facial expressions, body language, learning about that, which once it gets in the DSM, these interventions will be developed. But I am doing some groups this summer for school age kids.
Okay, we're going to circle right back around to that. I want to, there's a very patient person in the room. I'm going to read the question out, which is, here it is. My 13-year-old was just diagnosed with NVLD, and while the visuospatial issues are showing clearly in some areas, he is very coordinated athlete and also seems to do fine in math. Could that mean a misdiagnosis? Like, is it possible if he tested again neuropsych in a few years that he might not get that diagnosis again?
Well, it sounds, most of diagnosticians don't believe in NVLD or understand it. Like, so it sounds like this person is well versed, and everybody does not fit this protocol in the same way. This child is one of the rare few who's good in math, but there are ones that are good in math, and there are ones that are coordinated. But it's probably affecting more socially, emotionally. So when you do that test over, it's not like it's academics where you're going to grow in your knowledge. And you can academically improve, but when you're looking at these skills, it's probably going to come out the same way again. And I would trust this diagnostician because they know about it and they know how to tease it out. It's usually the other way around where they don't get the diagnosis and they're misdiagnosed with something else. So that's really good because now you can look for the right kind of help.
It's very interesting. You had mentioned some things about maybe not knowing where you are in space or klutziness. And my husband's an ADHD, my sister-in-law is, and when the family gets together, she famously wants to be in the kitchen and cuts herself, wearing her flip-flops, and does something to hurt her foot or trips or something. So I have some coordination issues and some strategies, right? Like if I'm in my high heels, I always hold the banister. I'm always holding the handrail. I really don't want falling down the stairs in my heels, but
does she also
I don't
have
know
ADHD?
that those things, right? There's more depth to what you're saying than just klutziness, isn't there?
Well, Is she also ADHD? Because then you have the impulse. Okay, this is totally me. This happened to me the other day in the elevator. If you have it, like a lot of time, you know, everybody with either there's inattentive, hyper impulsive type. I'm lucky I have the combined type. Do you ever, I don't know if you're hyper impulsive, but like waiting in a line, I feel like I'm going to explode. Like I will leave a line. I just feel like I'm going to explode. Or like, I'm like a bull in a china shop. Like, you know, I'm in the store and I'm like, I'm trying to like be focused and I'm like, you know, just going through things, you know. And I was in the elevator the other day. I live in a high rise. And like, I know I'm supposed to let older people go before me. You know, I know that. And I planned on doing it, but they were slow. And I just, you know, I was just like, get out the door. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
So people might think you're rude, you know, or just, you know, tripping, falling. You know, ADHD and NVLD is tough because you're impulsive and you already have visual spatial coordination problems, you know, or you don't know your strength, or, you know, like when I walk with people, I have to tell them, you know, I'm going to walk into you. Like I'm going to walk to the left. I don't know if that's because it's a right hemisphere problem connecting to the left. I have no research on that, but I will do that. I don't have, or, you know, standing too close to somebody. I don't have that, but you may stand, you know, ever be around somebody, they don't know your personal body space.
Yeah. But also this thing that you're saying, like if we're buddies, we're let's say we're having coffee, right? If you let me know, I might bump into you. Hey, that just, okay, now I know. Now I know that that's a
Well,
possibility.
that's a really good
It's
point.
not a personal thing. You're not trying to communicate to me that there's some handsome guy that we should be looking at over there. You know, this is what it is, exactly what it is. That
Well,
it helps
that's a
me,
good friend.
right, as your buddy. Yeah.
But that's a whole friendship topic now, if you want to get
Okay.
into that.
Yes.
Friend, you know, I don't know. You might have other questions, but I was out the other night and I like those chocolate espresso martinis, and I cannot hold that. That's a fine motor skill, right? My visual motor coordination is off. I will drop that. You know, you have those martini glasses. I can't hold them. They just spill all over me. So the person that I was with understood that and got me a straw. You know what I mean? But if you want to get into the friendship, we can get into that. You're a good friend. Some people are critical, judgmental, you know, and when you meet friends, you figure that out. You walk away from the ones, if you choose to disclose, a good person is going to understand. A person that doesn't have the kindness, compassion, you know, they're going to get frustrated with you and not try to see that you're not doing stuff on purpose. Just walk and run away. Run, because you don't deserve that. And there are nice people out there. And those people that are neurotypical, they've got their problems too. Mm-hmm. You know, but you know, I will walk away from people if they are like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people with NVLD won't. They're so desperate to have friends. They are so desperate. And I just say, look, you're not a beggar for a handout. You know what? You need to pick the right people. And I've picked the wrong people.
Oh, for sure. We've everyone.
Yeah.
This is how we learn, right? You bump up against the other potatoes. Right. The metaphor of being alive, and some potatoes give you an extra whack. Those, all right, I'm going to go look for some other nice people.
But even more so with NVLD, because you're not getting everything. Yeah. So it's very hard to trust people. Very hard to trust people because I have to go by my gut instinct. I have to feel it because I'm not picking up all the cues. So I guess it's like a blind person. They have extra things, but you know, just because somebody says something, anybody can say anything they want. But if you're only getting the words and you're believing them, the kids have to be protected.
This brings me to one of the questions that are in the Q&A tool, which is the problem interpreting or giving meaning to what's observed about the person, right? The person sitting next to you, the person that you're looking at, or is it that we're not processing the expressions we see? Is it a processing thing, or is it, hey, ADD was looking somewhere else and you made all those faces about the smell of my food and I didn't notice those? So is it noticing or interpreting or processing?
It's a little well, it's basically interpreting. if you don't have ADHD, NVLD can look like you're not listening or focusing. That's why you need somebody to really tease it out. But it is processing and understanding the meaning of what they're saying. Because remember, all that body language changes the words completely. So you may have somebody where I just got into this situation and where, you know, people don't like, you know, you're trying to cope with that. And, you know, it's a visual spatial processing deficit. So to answer the question, yes, it is understanding. Now, sometimes people will explain to you if it's a kind person. I have friends that are my real friends and they know me. And so they have, you know, they get me. And there's so many good qualities. Like they like me because I'm fun, you know, and all these other good qualities. And so I don't have too many bumps in the road with them, you know, but other people, like sometimes, you know, if they don't want to take the time, this is like a tip to this person. I don't know if this is an adult or do they have a child. If they don't want to take the time, and I lost it. I'm totally lost it. There's my ADHD. I lost my point.
And we're going to just
I just went into a black hole.
Yeah,
I went into a black. Oh, I got it. If they're answering you, they're getting frustrated with you because they're like, I answered all your questions, right? And you're still not getting it. And they don't understand why you're not getting it. And you have to be in the right relationship because you cannot make somebody understand that doesn't want to understand. And I've gotten hurt like that a lot. If somebody wants to understand, they're going to, you know, but yeah, so they may be frustrated. I answered all your questions, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. You went from here to there. I'm going to circle
You followed
to
me?
one thing just to highlight something right? This losing track of what we're thinking. So ADD. Someone showed me what it looks like when we're reading and how we read a sentence is we don't even get out of the first clause. We go back and forth 2 or 3 times and then we're over here and that we're circling back and that we have some sort of, I don't know if it's a evolved habit of circling, our brain circles, or if it's just part of the ADHD. But you got to pause a second and you'll come right back to it. And when you're in the right place, people want to hear what the thing that you were saying. So we're just going to relax until you get to it. Yeah.
Right. And so like, you know, I have ADHD. I'm just like everybody else is listening. You know, I do that.
Yeah. There's another question.
And menopause on top of it.
And there's one over here that I want to give some oxygen to, which is, do you have thoughts about bilateral eye movement therapy for people with these kinds of developmental disabilities? That was person to talk about it.
So I think they're talking about visual therapy, vision therapy.
Maybe
it sounds like
eye teaming.
Okay, so right. Well, I had for okay, so eye teaming. What you can do to see is if you put your finger and you tell somebody just flash my finger and it goes into their nose. People that don't have it, I'm just telling other people, if they're listening, they might not know. You're rubbing your eyes all the time. And it's because your muscles aren't strong. It's like going to the gym. So years ago, before I got like my master's and I had to like do vision therapy. So if it's that cause, but there's all different, right? There's vision therapy. There's people have different problems. It's like, it's not like one size fits all. So the eye teaming can be worked on. You know, so you need but
I did that eye therapy too. I did some eye teaming therapy stuff too in my 30s.
Yeah. And so, and that'll make school easier, a lot easier reading. But there's also this other visual processing stuff, right? Like discriminating, you know, you have like, this happened to me the other day. Like there's deodorant right in front of me and I'm looking for it. Or I'm looking for the mayonnaise in the fridge. It is right in front of me. And I can't find, and I'm looking. I'm like, oh, it's right there. It's in front of me. But the brain isn't discriminating from all the stuff around it right away. And if you have ADHD too, but it can help to answer the question. It definitely can help. And I've done some visual because I do a combination of training like that. That's a whole nother brain training, but with more components than just the vision. But I have had some people, it is a crapshoot, that it doesn't work. Like I've had a couple of people with NVLD that did not move. Their visual processing did not go up. And then I've had other people, their visual, maybe they were below age level, but maybe it still went up, like 3 years.
Mhm.
Maybe they were like 7 behind according to testing and it went up. Or maybe I got them way above them where they were, above average. You just don't know because you're not inside the brain.
Okay. So I want to put some technical terms to the things you're saying to help people. This helps me, so I'm hoping it's helpful to other people. When we were preparing, there was a couple of different words you used. Visual discrimination, that's finding the
Right.
maze, right? Visual
Right.
processing, that's interpreting what you're seeing, right? In some way.
Okay, so visual processing is the whole enchilada. It covers,
Okay.
it's an umbrella. So you can have problems with visual processing. It could be visual spatial. Where is your body in space? Are you bumping into things?
So is that like
That's
spatial integration?
that's movement, right? That's movement stuff, or being able to look at something a different way, that you have to look at it. It's a hard thing for me to explain, like when you would do that, but
Okay.
and then you have visual memory, you have visual discrimination. This is all under visual processing. You have visual spatial, visual discrimination, which affects a lot of different things, right? It could affect handwriting. It could affect using utensils. You're not really, coordinated. It could, like when I was growing up, everybody knew where Linda sat because there was all the crumbs on the floor everywhere. Because it's a coordination thing, right?
Would you have even gotten diagnosed if you had a dog that would have licked all those crumbs up? Just making a joke.
Right.
Just making a joke.
Okay, but that's a good point. Do you know what I just did?
What?
These people with envy. I will share anything that is embarrassing to me. I'm 60 years old. I don't care like I used to when I was younger. But if it's going to help somebody, I will share something embarrassing because people don't talk about the real life stuff. I didn't get that. Like, that's one of the signs. I did not get that until you explained it to me. I did not say, I just pretended I got it. But like we are talking about NVLD in this webinar, and it is I just gave you a real life example. I didn't get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for people, that's embarrassing. If you're around people, if you're not around other neurodivergent people, like if you're around a bunch of neurotypicals and you're at a cocktail party or you're here or there, and you're like, yeah, I mean, you're not going to say, oh, I have NVLD and I don't get like idioms or metaphors or, which I do get. I mean, I've learned over the years. I mean, that's the thing that you can learn these things to cope.
Yeah.
I'm a real example of that. I struggled my whole life tremendously. And so you can improve.
Okay.
But
I've got a couple of questions and I'm on the hour managing time. I'm going to give us just a little moment. I'm going to do a little thank you to RenaFi for being our host. And then we're going to come right back and answer these 3 questions that are over here around research, college age student with this, and migraines. I'm appetite wetting there. And I'll be right back. Let me do my station thing, which is to say, RenaFi. We teach about the underlying drivers of our behavior, and that knowledge leads to better decisions, and better decisions lead to an improved quality of life. Visit RenaFi.com and discover how you can experience financial wellness. If you were a RenaFi member, this week you would find a budgeting help workshop that meets twice a week. So one of those times will be good for you. Building self-awareness and setting goals, discovering what drives you. Our book club where we're doing the mindfulness prescription for adult ADHD, the Lydia Zylowska book. There it is. And Rick has open office hours, and we are doing guided meditations 3 times a week. So that just a small smattering of what's available to our members. All right. Thank you for a brief step away. And here we're going to return right back to where we were. So we had a couple of questions sitting in the queue.
I just want to say about the financial,
Please.
that's really good for people with NVLD and you might want to let people know in your community, because I have a community Facebook of NVLD people, and some people really struggle with money. If you're ADHD and you're impulsive on top of it, but with budgeting and things like that, it's good for people to know in your community that struggle.
It is. I mean, I was sharing very recently when I first met Rick, he had this, 5 pillars of something to do with your finances. And one of them was pay off your credit cards. It did take me a long time, but I got my 9/11 credit card that I bought that weekend. I got that credit card so I could get home to see my family. I finally got that down to 0. But you need someone to tell
Yay.
you. I just thought I'll pay some, then I put something on it. I pay some, then it would never going away. So this tried and true, trustworthy content around finances and designed for neurodivergent people. It's
Right.
Rick brings his A game to that. We've got a couple of questions. I want to make sure I don't lose the ones that are in the chat, and also some relating to this, right? So there's in the chat, I told you that 3 times, but you don't seem to remember it. My husband and I have a strategy called It's New to Me Now, which is, you might have told it to me, but I can't remember it now. So just get me up to speed, and let's not have a conversation about anything else. Just get me up to speed.
Yeah. But sometimes we do remember and they don't, so it could be tricky.
This is what's fascinating. The parent, I think, had ADHD, known for their memory, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is this related to dyspraxia? Is dyspraxia fit into this context in some way?
Dyspraxia, developmental coordination disorder. You can get that, since some people that don't get an NVLD diagnosis, they could get kind of like separate ones. They could get dyscalculia for math. They might get dyslexia, because people with NVLD, they're really great readers, but they may not comprehend. But dyspraxia, if this person can't get an NVLD diagnosis, then they could probably go to a physical therapist. But yes, that's part of it.
Wow, thank you.
I mean, but then there's people that have dyspraxia that don't have NVLD. So.
Oh, somebody put a word in that I always trip over. How about I'm not going to do it. It's that sensory, that proprioception. Did I get it?
Proprioceptive.
God, thank you. I've been told I have that rather than dyspraxia. So is that in the same universe? Are we all in the same universe?
Well, a lot of it's just terminology.
Oh.
Like, is it developmental coordination disorder, or is it dyspraxia? Is it social pragmatics for social skills problems? Or is that part of NVLD? It's a lot of terminology.
Okay. I feel like
the way people are using it.
Are the words getting in the way of the communicating is what I feel like I hear you say. You don't know where your body is in space with that kind of thing. If I touch a wall, for example, to keep. Yeah,
or you may not know your strength.
Okay.
You might
So that is in this body, inside this NVLD.
Yeah.
This thing. Okay. That was helpful. Do NVLDers, are they prone to migraines?
Yes, they are. I don't know if there's research on that. I do know of several in my group that get migraines, and they have said that they were able to find somebody that was able to help them with it. But I do hear that that's a part of it. I don't know what the research is on it, but there is something with the brain. Not everybody has these symptoms. But if they're getting migraines, they totally impacted my life. And I don't think it was NVLD. So I would encourage this person. For me, it was gluten and dairy. And I didn't know it because I never had that sensitivity my whole life. I mean, I'm Italian. I grew up eating like bread every night and pasta. And all of a sudden, your body changes. So I would try that as well, because I found out when I was getting all these headaches, and I went to the doctor and he just started writing down what I was eating and telling me that could be part of it. And maybe it's NVLD and that, and every little thing you do kind of adds up. Tell them to take butter burr too. That's a supplement. They use it at the Jefferson Clinic for headaches at university.
Okay, we got a big question over here, which is, what suggestions can you give to a parent with a college-age son living at home who may have this? Communication strategies, how to better communicate with him.
There's so many prongs to that, because a lot of kids in college, they do not want to accept that they have NVLD. And I see this all the time. And the parents contact me wanting me to help their adult child, but they don't want the help.
Yes.
So then you have to work with the parent. How are they going to communicate with somebody whose thinking is rigid and flexible? A lot of people with NVLD, it's black or white. So I tell parents, if your kid's like that, or if they're younger, paint black and white and show them there's gray. Give a real life example. But that works with younger kids, but maybe not a college kid. It can be very difficult because of the cognitive inflexibility. And I don't know if that's what it sounds like. That question might be like that. I don't know. But for communication, if they're going to work with you, then you have a lot of options. Yeah. If they're not, which I don't see that much, unfortunately. At that age, they seem to, some people have to fail many, 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 many times. Many times. And with ADHD, they don't always learn from their mistakes. But when you become an adult and you have to be responsible for your life, it could be very painful. So for a parent communicating, it would really depend on the level of their child, because they're going to have to be, it's a tightrope walk, because they're an adult and they want all the adult privileges. But just like with ADHD and NVLD, developmentally, they're not. So you kind of have to not want to be, and I don't know if I'm answering the question, I'm just surmising it based on what I work with. Yeah. You can't be afraid to say no and give in all the time. You have to kind of hold your ground a little bit and have compassion.
This question kind of reminds me, and your considerations around it remind me of when I was volunteering at a nonprofit, and sometimes parents would sign their young adult children up for like a peer support group for ADHDers. And if the person themselves didn't seek it, they're not that excited to be signed up for it. Like we need to, we're each on our own journey.
Right. We can't have parents doing things because they want them to do it and they're an adult. Mm-hmm. And, I see parents, I don't have a crystal ball. I would never say to anybody, you can't. I mean, I was told I wasn't college material. I have a master's degree. I was a late bloomer, right? And I have the gift of perseverance and a strong will, which a lot of kids, this could apply to that, do not have today. We grew up in a different time. They don't have the resiliency or the problem solving. But all right, where was I again?
I think we had really fully answered the thing. I
don't know. I was going to make a point about that. And, there has to be accountability. Like I've told parents, they're spending hundreds of all this money when the kid isn't really ready for college. And you're telling them that. I'm not saying they can't go to college. They are not ready. And they also don't want to accept it. But if you have, like with this college kid, you can't just give them things that they want when they're not ready for it, and just because they're an adult. You see the conflict there?
I just know that once you get to be 18, you think I make my choices and you can't make me do it. And so,
Well,
yes,
yeah.
but this
And
thing
throw
is like, how can
NVLD
I
on
better
top of that.
communicate with this person who, and also, I mean, there's still this teenage stuff that your brain's not all the way
Right,
finished, you're hormonal, that I
right.
wish parents of teenagers all the energy and luck they can get. I do. I
Well, and the other
absolutely
thing
do.
is they want to have compassion because their kid has a problem,
Yeah.
but they make life too easy and they lower the bar and the expectation. So you kind of can't do that either.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
It's a
the more
tight,
what's interesting about this NVLD is like you could be a fast reader, but you didn't necessarily
right.
recall it. You can be excellent speaker and have outstanding um, ability to communicate in certain ways. And then it's got a lot of asynchrony in it that is confusing. It's very confusing.
It's situational too, because like for me, I don't have problems in with friendships with people that know me. I don't really have any problems because I've created my own little thing,
Mhm.
my environment, and I know what will work for me and what won't. And but it's different when there's different levels of it. It's situational. There's because you need different communication and work than you do with a friend.
Yes.
An acquaintance doesn't, there's research that says it's 50 hours the time to get to learn somebody just to be an acquaintance. I think it's 200 hours to become a close friend.
Yeah.
Now, and when you have NVLD, you have all the other challenges that communicating at work, friendships,
Mm.
and then love relationships and partnerships. Those are hard enough as they are, even if you don't have any problems, right? So, like you're saying, it is situational. Like an acquaintance isn't going to know what you struggle with because they don't see you enough frequently. Hi, how are you? Things like that.
Okay, we have got one other question in the question universe, which is there any research or anecdotal evidence that people with NVLD also have hypermobility disorders? And there's an example, which is not familiar to me, so good luck with
Okay.
pronouncing it. I hope I do okay. Ehlers, Ehlers,
I don't know
Danlos.
what that is. Can they tell
Okay.
us what that
So
is?
let's say hypermobility. Let's go with hypermobility. I'll look that up. Is that another co-occurring
I'm not really
thing?
sure what hypermobility is.
I'm going to look up this
I,
thing
I
and
don't
we'll
know.
circle around. Yeah.
I mean, I have to be honest, I'm not really sure what that is, but I know there's no research on it, or I would know it. I would hope I would know it, but maybe I don't. I can't read everything. But I don't think there would be research on it, but I don't know because there's so little research on NVLD. So the NVLD project, which I wanted to refer people there, there's a lot of resources there.
Okay.
And I'm
So
an
I looked up
ambassador for them.
this syndrome and it has to do with inherited disorders that affect connective tissues like your skin and your joints.
Oh, like
So
RSD and things
hypermobility.
like that.
Mhm.
Yes, I believe that there is a connection. Is that spina bifida? Is that one of the? I'm not really sure, but I do think that there might be a connection.
Okay. That's
Um,
helpful as a starting
I mean,
point,
I would tell
right?
this person to go on Google Scholar and put that in there on Google Scholar. I think that there is some kind of connection.
So there were some things we mentioned in passing that I just want to underline, right? We talked about handwriting as a possible indicator because it had to do with fine motor skills. And
Oh, well,
I have
the
my
handwriting.
own,
You can tell them that. Yeah, tell
I
them.
have my own very lovely handwriting. I'm just joking. And you sent me something with handwriting on it, and I was like, your handwriting is absolutely beautiful compared to mine. So
Well,
there's
that's a
some
visual
planning
motor
issues,
thing.
right? There were some planning issues. That's another overlap with ADHD, right?
Yeah, ADHD could be like you can't focus, or it could just be a fine motor problem. But there's also learning disabilities, and maybe people, some, are diagnosed with learning disabilities, but it has to be teased out. Like I would have kids that just would write slanted on the paper, or didn't have the visual memory to remember that a G and a Q or a D and a P, like those things are common up until third grade.
Yeah.
But that's visual memory and visual discrimination. You have to remember the shape of the letter, but you also have to be able to look at it and discriminate it.
Okay.
And so that's, so it's a lot of fine motor. It's a lot of planning, like,
there were some other things you had mentioned in passing, like getting lost in the hotel at the conference. You might have other getting lost things. Yeah.
Well, when I went to the ADHD conference, there's a lot going on there, and at any conference, right? And I get lost. Like sometimes I'll panic because you know how hotel rooms, they all have the same wallpaper and the same, like, so like I thought I was on here on this, and I was like, where am I? And I got lost at the conference a lot because the way those buildings are. And I heard next year there's 2 buildings to get lost in, 2 separate buildings. And so I would have to, I really honestly didn't take the time, because it's like everybody's on steroids there on ADHD at that conference, that I should have taken the time to really walk around and see, but I get lost all the time, even like when I have the navigator. Like I would know how to get from my house to somewhere.
Yeah.
But don't ask me to get there to somewhere else. I could see it right in my mind. I have the visual memory, but I can't connect it. Unless I take the time.
But you can drive your car. You do drive a car.
Absolutely.
Right? That's a
but
question.
Some people with NVLD very struggle with driving. A lot of them are terrified to drive. Yeah. I don't have that problem.
Rick's very funny. He says, because the conference is in Orange County, it's like, if you can't find your way around the conference, let's just go to Disneyland.
You and I talked about a Sherpa, right?
Yes.
I'm bringing a Sherpa.
A helper. So Sherpa is from the people who climb up Mount Everest. The local people will get paid and be Sherpas. They'll carry the stuff up, but they'll help guide people. So you want to
what about leaving the room?
Yeah.
And then every time you try to get out of the hotel room, you said with all the ADHD people had to go back 2 and 3 times just getting out of the house. And there's so much going on there, and the packing. Mm-hmm. But, what you had said about you've been with ADHD people and everyone had to go back 2 times.
Oh, yeah. The first conference I went to, my little group of friends thought we'd meet, and then we'd leave the hotel and walk to a restaurant, and literally every one of them, spouses and ADHDers alike, every one of us had to go back up to the room, not once but twice. Every one of us twice.
Right.
Memorable to me.
Right. All right.
Let's do some. What do you do? How do you do it? How do you get through the day? So I was looking for some go-to strategies, stuff that is you don't have to think about it. This isn't looking at your cheat sheet. This is go-tos. What tools do you use?
Well, they've changed over the years, because now that as we age, we have other things going on. So there's more challenges, I think. So I've had to change. Things have somewhat gotten harder with ADHD and menopause. That's a whole nother thing, because we lose more dopamine and stuff. So, I mean, a lot of people with ADHD are like terrified that they have Alzheimer's and dementia, but my go-tos have changed. So most mornings I will listen to like It's a Lovely Day, Bill Withers. I just, the music, the vibe gets me. And what was the other? I always say that wrong. It's by Coldplay.
I went and looked it up, and somehow it's still not sitting right here, but it was Coldplay, and it was like a La Vida. It's very catchy.
Right.
It's very upbeat,
with Ricky Martin.
Right along.
I read about that because there was a psychologist that did studies on that, and he used that in the study, so I started using it. So I do that. Those 2 songs, tons of reminders, timers. With Alexa, like I told you with socks, I just get all the same color, all the same. It's just easy. I try to automate things, as much as I can. Alexa heard me.
You saying is you take some of the friction out. You take some of the friction out. If I have all the same
Right.
color socks, there's no decision to be made there.
There's no,
If I-
like even a work uniform. If you look at Steve Jobs, you look at what's his name, Facebook guy. What's his name? The guy that started.
Zuckerberg.
Yeah, these highly people, they wear. It's a less decision to make to have a work uniform.
Yeah.
I used to have I wear a lot of black.
Yeah.
You know, the simplest thing that you can wear that eliminates the decision.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, you know, so those are the kind of strategies I try to do. Like when I was into making smoothies, I would prepare them all for the week. I don't do that anymore, but that was, you know, how we get tired of things and we change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So like, you know, like for a while I was doing all this batch cooking and freezing it. And then I'm like, okay, this isn't novel enough for me anymore. So then I just started ordering from these different places and, you know.
Yeah.
But
we have to switch it
up.
up.
I try to automate and outfits too. I try to put them together. When I was teaching, I would take pictures of them. So because, you know, as a woman, we have to wear different, it's easier for men. So I take different pictures and I put them in the closet.
And people are relating to this, right? They like the idea we don't have to make a lot of choices, the one color socks, and also this, right? How am I going to remember exactly which ones are the black pants or the right pants for this, for example, jacket that you're wearing, right? So to take a picture of it,
do you want to hear something really funny?
You kept a record of it. Yeah.
I'm going to, because I've been sharing my foibles with you tonight. You see what I'm wearing?
Pink.
Because my boyfriend, I was working on the computer 1 minute before I'm supposed to get it, because I had my jacket hung up with this shirt. I'm ready to get on with you. And I wasn't like dressed to come on, like, you know, like, and he's like, here's your jacket. So I ran out and I put the jacket on and the shirt. I'm like, I need lipstick. You know, so that's another, I had it ready, but I know people will be able to relate to that because then it was also managing time with time blindness as well.
Yes, the managing time.
It was a combination.
And then I, you know, only to highlight it because I noticed it is, look at this great person who's in your universe who also notices the time, wants to help you be your best. Hey, here's those clothes. Here it is, ready for you. I'm not making you know about that you're not wearing them. I'm just bringing it to you at the right.
But this is a very new experience for me. And I'm looking, we don't have time. Are we going over? Or we only have what, four minutes?
I promise. I'll invite you back to talk about this. I promise. Yeah,
that's a whole nother thing, you know, to have a support person that helps you. If you can find one, you're really lucky, right? You know that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is something I have to, and not exactly a question, but I really need to bring it to your attention so you can put some oxygen in the room for it. So this is from the chat. Our son was diagnosed with DCD, which prompted findings of hypermobility post his diagnosis with NVLD. So I don't know what DCD means, but I bet you do.
DCD?
That's what it says, but
developmental coordination disorder.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
He's got two things, it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's tough.
Validating.
That's a lot to deal with. You know, and it can be very difficult with NVLD. I get calls all the time, people really struggling. More so adults, because, you know, now we know more autism now, so we get a little bit more understanding, but it's adults who should have had the support and that didn't, you know.
Yes, when we're investigating, what can I do to help myself? And then we get some language and some labels, and do those things come with interventions or strategies? Do we have to find other people who have that so that we can see how do they do it, right?
And that's what, you know, I have the NVLD Pioneers Facebook group, you know, it's a support group. So I would encourage anybody to go in there because people are exchanging notes all the time. You know, they're talking about, you know, I'm in work right now and somebody's being disrespectful to me, like, you know, or they'll just start putting things in there. So that's a help.
So Linda is offering a newsletter sign up to get a executive functioning tool. Her parent book coaching club, and social skills for elementary and middle school students. And what the email to Linda at yourlastname.com, is that the one to get these things?
Yeah, but
Reach out
are
to you
you going to
there?
put all the links up, because it's a mouthful?
I am.
It's either Linda, I'll give you the
I got it.
easier one, Linda at advantageslearningcenter.com. That's the easier one because my last name's longer. So it's the word advantages, everybody here knows, with 2 Ds. ADD. Linda
I've got
at
one email, I dropped it in for
advantageslearningcenter.com.
them, so they got that. All right, let
They
me
can put their name, what they're interested in, and the age. And I, because I also do that executive functioning work, which I don't approach it with strategies. I more focus it with like developing the cognitive processing skills, which is different.
Wow, okay.
The
So
strategies will only get you so far.
building skills, then you have them with you. That makes
Right.
sense to me. All right, so I put what you're offering, I put the way to reach you. I put your link to your Facebook group. I'm going to put all the other links that I have for the different ways people can connect with you, which is your
Okay.
social media, the organization that you work with, your Advantages Learning, and your book. I'll put all of that in one more time.
And then there's the lindakaranzalis.com,
I got that too.
which has a lot of good resources on there.
Did I put that in there? Let's see. Right, and here's that. There's that website. Okie doke, I got all of them. Score! All right. I wanted to circle back just because you were sharing your go-tos and how useful they are. Like, we kind of throw away the, oh, music, whatever. Like, that just is fun. But learning through fun, having these things that we know buoy our mood, make it more easy, grease the wheels for getting started.
Yeah.
I just love that it was this Coldplay song that starts La Vida something.
Right.
That other song that was an oldie but a goodie. I loved your dad's keep it simple message to you.
Oh yeah,
I
that's
liked
another
your
thing.
squeeze ball that you know,
Yeah.
sometimes we need to have some place to direct other
Right.
energy.
Or my doodling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the keep it simple I learned from my dad, and I have a whole chapter on how my parents dealt with me, even though they didn't know about any of this. They came up with their own ways to help me.
Great parents.
You know, keep it
coming up
simple,
with it.
right?
Yeah.
What, you know, like I told you, the slice and bake cookies are just as good as homemade. You know, keep it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple. So doable. For me, that's one of the
Right.
unsaid about keep it simple is
Right.
it can happen. When you make it too complex, it becomes undoable.
Right. And there's tons of research. Music is great for people. You can do music playlists. Like I've done them with kids. They get to pick the music they like. You know how they can't get out of the house in the morning and parents are nagging them. But if every little skill they do, you pick a song that's timed, and or they hear the song and they, I'm supposed to be doing this now during this song. Oh, now this song, because transitions are hard. So you can use the music to transition.
Yes, that's why we did a little breathing. So anyone who's still here and started with us at the beginning, if you would like to notice how you're feeling now, maybe use the chat for noticing that. So 5, the top, full of beans, energized, ready to go. The other end of the scale, 1, tired, fatigued, out of gas. I came in myself around 4, and I feel like maybe even a little more energized, maybe 4.5. This was really engaging, and more things got said here than even in our preparation. And the questions people brought with them really opened this conversation up. I hope it was useful to people. I noticed there's a lot of parents in the room looking what
That's my passion.
Myself and my kids.
I don't want anybody to suffer like I did. I feel like I was put here. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. Learn through my pain. That's why I wrote the book, if I can help anybody. You know,
the book has really so much useful resources, those checklists that you can bring to the doctor, or that you can start to use to notice for yourself what are the edges of NVLD, where do I relate to it,
or just feeling like you're not crazy. or you're not crazy. I'm not making this up.
No.
You know, the validation is big.
So important to be valid. It really makes all the difference in the world. It does. Thank you, Linda, for bringing so much here and sharing it with us. Let me do some of my wrapping up order. I'm still using my cheat sheet, which is, okay, so what do I do now? First, I thank everyone for being here. I did that part. My upcoming guests are Dr. Lisa Zaretsky, who will be speaking around, I think, bullying and shame. We're going to have Dr. Caroline Parcells come and speak with us and answer questions around medications and working with your prescriber. So those are upcoming guests. At RenaFi, we've got our ADHD Voices project. Call and leave an anonymous message or text. Share your ADHD story. And the phone number for that is 925-289-9033. I'm going to put that in the chat so people can find it without having to remember all those numbers, because that's a challenge. We have a free quick start guide for the newly diagnosed, as well as a free Facebook group that is a self-care challenge, where we've got a self-care challenge each week. So I'll put those links into the chat. And all right, those are all those things. And until next time, those are all my pieces. Those are all the pieces. Again, thank you, Linda, for being here.